And so I will start by welcoming Fred Thiel, who is always, so ready to just kind of leap in and help us understand what's happening in our community and in the state regarding different political issues. And so we're pleased to have him here tonight. He's running for re-election. We all want to support him and get the vote out for him. And Fred's going to start tonight by telling us a little bit about the two, or possibly a lot about the two referendums that are on the ballot. So Fred, welcome to Peer's meeting. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Catherine. And it's good to see everybody. It's good to be back at the peer meeting. And I really appreciate you having me. And all these the numerous issues, some of which we're going to talk about, of which we have mutual interest and concern and want to try to move forward, whether they be locally in Albany or in Washington. And of course, we are, I think, 26 days from Election Day. Not that I'm counting, but we're under a month to go. And this is when the public, a lot of us, including, the people that are on this call, we focus on these issues all the time, or almost all the time. But this is the time of year where the public really starts to focus on, what's on the ballot, who's running for what office and all of those things. And, there's some important matters to that we need to decide. And so I'm going to talk about the referenda to start with. And there's three of them, actually. One of them I will just briefly mention. It's a county referendum. It's kind of a correction to an existing part of the county charter. But the first thing I want to mention about the referenda, all of the referenda, is and a lot of you have heard me say this probably to ad nauseum because I say it so much. But when you get your ballot and you go to vote, it's a big, bulky kind of ballot that, and we have optical scan machines, so you gotta fill in the circles and all of that. The front of the ballot is very, very important. Obviously, that's where the candidates are. And I'm one of them. So I really think the front of the ballot is really, really important. But, where voters get to decide directly on policy issues is on these propositions. And they are on the back of the ballot. And people often, they're feeling stressed or rushed when we're going to vote. And sometimes people forget to flip the ballot over and vote for the propositions on the back of the ballot. So at the outset, I just want to remind you, and I probably will remind you a couple of more times, you need to flip over the ballot to vote on the propositions. And, I'm pretty proud of the campaign we ran a couple of years ago when we added water quality to the Community Preservation Fund. We literally had a whole segment of our campaign that talked about flipping over the ballot. And that year for the water quality referendum, it's one of the rare times that I remember more people actually voted for the ballot proposition than voted for the candidates, which I tried not to take personally, but I was really happy that people came out and remembered to flip over the ballot and thought that water quality was so important they voted for it. And that ballot proposition won with 80% of the vote. So first and foremost, if you don't vote for it, it can't pass. Remember to flip over the ballot. So I'm going to go through the propositions one by one. The first ballot proposition is the State Bond Act. It is the Clean Water, Clean Air, Green Jobs Bond Act. And, you would have thought maybe we could have come up with something a little easier to try to market to people. Other than that title, I suspect the title alone will take up a fair amount of the back of the ballot, but it's descriptive. It does say exactly what it's going to do. And you may remember that, originally by the way, this will be the first environmental bond act in the state of New York since 1996. We haven't had a bond act in over 25 years for the environment, which is hard to believe. We have had our annual or our recurring environmental fund, the Environmental Protection Fund, which now has about $400 million a year in it. But we haven't had a bond act since 1995. George Pataki was governor the last time there was a state bond act. It's been way too long, but this was supposed to be on the ballot in 2020. When the former governor, I think it was entitled the Mother Nature Bond Act back then. So maybe this is an improvement over that. But it was supposed to be on the ballot. It was supposed to be $3 billion. But there was an escape clause on it, in that the governor had the ability to pull the ballot, the referendum from the ballot because of COVID. And that's what happened. So we didn't vote in 2020. The state's finances, this was before all of the Biden legislation, all the COVID legislation that helped local governments and state governments out of the pandemic with some of our financial problems. So it got pulled in 2020. We brought it back this year and we added to it. The state legislature increased the amount from the $3 billion to $4.2 billion. So it's a $4.2 billion state bond act. As I said, the general title is clean air, clean water, green jobs. A lot of this is really our down payment to pay for, the climate act that we passed, was setting all these goals and standards in 2019 for climate change. It costs money to reach those standards, and I view this bond act, it's not going to pay for that. We need a lot more money than that, but it's really a big down payment on it. And there's a number of different categories. I will go through them briefly. There's out of the $4.2 billion, the first category is restoration and flood risk reduction. Not less than $1.1 billion has to be spent on restoration and flood risk reduction. This can go for things like wetland and floodplain and stream restoration, flood buyouts for willing sellers, endangered and threatened species conservation projects identified in an estuary program like the Peconic Estuary. So that's good for us on the East End, because we not only have the Peconic Estuary program, we have the Long Island Sound Estuary program and the South Shore Estuary program. So that's one category, not less than $1.1 billion. Water quality improvement and resilience infrastructure, not less than $650 million. And this is important. You've seen the effort that the County Executive Ballone has been making and the towns have been making with regard to nitrogen removal and water quality, wastewater infrastructure, IA septic systems, stormwater, agricultural nutrient pollution, algal bloom abatement. A lot of the money will go for that. And this is also a big priority on the East End. The third category is open space land conservation and recreation, up to $650 million for that. That is kind of self-explanatory, and this will allow us to use some of our local community preservation fund money to leverage some state money for open space preservation and conservation and for farmland preservation. And then the last category, although I think almost all of these relate to climate change anyway, but the last category is climate change mitigation of $1.5 billion, up to $1.5 billion. And that would go for green building projects, investments to reduce urban heat, such as green roofs, reducing air and water pollution, affecting environmental justice communities. And by the way, 35% of the money from this bond act has to go for environmental justice projects. So that is kind of a brief overview of what this bond act is all about. As I said, $4.2 billion is a fairly substantial investment in these categories. I think Long Island, particularly the East End, will be a major beneficiary of a lot of these projects. There are things that we've been already doing, and will give us the ability to do that much more. So that's the first project. The first proposition is in its proposal number one. There's been some polling on this, which you probably have seen. Whether it's the Siena poll or there's been some others, but there seems to be some good broad-based support for this. These bond issues always do well on Long Island and the city of New York, and then we have to fight hard upstate, to match the margin. But some of the polling I've seen on this has been, 57% in favor, 35% opposed. I mentioned this, and I don't want people to get, to think, hey, we're home free on this, because we're not. I'm going to explain this with regard to all three of our referenda tonight, especially the housing referendum and this one, is that, we start out in a good place. And, whether it's climate change, the environment, or housing, people realize that there's a problem and we need to do something. And that's on one side of the seesaw as we're balancing these things out. The other thing that I just have to mention on this is that, it's not the best political climate out there. People are angry, people are cranky, people are unhappy coming out of the pandemic. It's been, it's a tough climate. You see the question in polls, do you feel like the state or the country is headed in the right direction? It's underwater. More people think we're headed in the wrong direction, which is, never great if you're involved in government. And then second, if you ask the question, whether it's state or local government, do you have a favorable opinion of government? That question, isn't doing all that well either. So, on the one hand, people recognize there are issues that need to be solved. The environment and housing is one of them. And people, you don't have to educate people that these are important issues. But, kind of blowing in our face and the wind in the other direction is this political climate. So, kind of for all of these propositions, we start out in a good place, but it's no time to be complacent, because, when your numbers of support are in the mid 50s, I'd rather have the support be in the mid 50s and the opposition be in the mid 50s, but there's not a lot of room for error there. So there really is the need to get people out to vote. And, this applies to the candidates too. There's a lot of close races out there. Turnout is important, and especially with these propositions. Again, I'll say it for the second time. You don't want to go into all the effort to get people out to vote and then have them forget to flip the ballot over and vote for the proposition. So, to me, that's the message there on Proposition 1, we start out in a good place. But, it's not a slam dunk, and we've got to get our voters out and get them to vote.
So, Fred, if I can interject, maybe at this
sure.
point that you've covered proposition number 1, it might be good to ask questions on each proposition as we go along. And if you could just
sure.
raise your hand and I'll call on you. I'll just start with a quick question about the Greenbelt here in Sag Harbor and the controversy about the LIPA line going through it. Would money from this particular bond be able to be applied to that project?
Yeah, I think, this, you got to look at what is the purpose of that overall project. And, the purpose of it is to transmit energy. And I think you could make a linkage between that project and all of the projects for offshore wind and all of that, and the need to do this in an environmentally sensitive way that, I think you could make the nexus there, that a project like this could be eligible. And of course, with this particular, LIPA/PSENG Long Island project, their reluctance to take an alternative route is the increased cost of there's most of the consensus is that it should go not through the Greenbelt, but to the south along Montauk Highway. So, I think we're making some progress there. The grassroots effort on this has just been outstanding. And I think people that went to the LIPA meeting, the board meeting about a week or so ago and spoke about this project would say that they were paying attention and that this is something that is really on their radar screen. And they haven't finished the final environmental impact statement on this project yet, but I expect to see further outreach on this probably from LIPA and PSENG, probably after Election Day. I don't think it has any relation to Election Day. I'm just using that as when I think it's going to happen. And, we'll know the fate of the Bond Act there too. So maybe that's something that we'll be able to talk about. So,
Great.
so any other questions on this, or I'll move forward?
I see Francesca has one. If she wants to unmute herself, please go for it.
Sure. So my understanding is that this would not raise people's taxes, but that is a question that I get about it, and I just wonder what the answer is.
Well, it is, you know, it's a $4.2 billion bond act. It's like any bond act, whether it's a local bond act or here, you got to pay for it, right? It's $4.2 billion. So, you know, there has to be revenue to pay for it. This is a capital bond act. So it's going to get paid off probably, in this case, probably over 30 years, and we'll have to pay the debt service. But, you know, to pay for that in the context of the overall state budget, we do not have to raise income taxes or sales taxes or corporate taxes, or, you know, there's no contemplation of raising taxes to pay the debt service off on this over the next 30 years. It can be, you know, every year, one of the budget bills is debt service. And, you know, it's one of the smaller parts actually of the overall budget. But, you know, debt service has to be paid. So, Francesca, we got to pay for it. You know, it's not free money, but I mean, it's within our overall financial plan, and there's no, there's nothing that would require us to raise taxes to fit this in to our annual debt service payments for the budget. So, you know, the answer is we got to pay for it. You know, that money's going to be, it's going to be paid for with taxes, but there's no anticipation that we'll have to increase taxes to pay for it.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on the first proposition? Michael has his hand raised. Michael, please unmute yourself.
Sure, Fred. So not to get into the weeds on this, but so if a bond act gets passed like this, then how does that money get distributed? Is that, so it's going to be in the state, and then does every, you know, municipality have to kind of compete for that, or is that going to be part of your job?
If you think of, I think this will be very similar to prior bond acts. You know, there'll be an application process. There's usually a requirement for a local match, which we are well positioned for because we can use the Community Preservation Fund, you know, for the local match on a lot of these different projects. So typically, you know, there's an, you know, we don't pay this back all at once. It's over 30 years. The money doesn't get distributed all at once either. You know, getting the money out the door on something like this is probably going to, you know, for some of the categories, it'll be 5 years, probably somewhere in that range, between 5 and 10 years. So there'll be an application process, you know, for distributing the money. You know, people will be able to submit projects, and you know, there'll be criteria and standards. You know, the general standards I've already outlined, but you know, there'll be they'll typically, you know, some of this will be with the DEC. Probably some of this will get, some of the energy stuff will be through NYSERDA. Some of the open space and parkland might be through the Parks Department, but they'll have a process and they'll have a scoring system and weighting these projects, just like there has been for other bond acts. So it's designed to be a merit-based system. Best projects win. You know, it's not a political process whereby the legislature, you know, we're out there, you know, picking our favorite political projects, which, you know, I think is a better way to do it. Not that I wouldn't have some meritorious projects to suggest, but, you know, I'll get my opportunity, you know, to write support letters for projects, but, you know, there'll be a, you know, a coherent and, you know, kind of, you know, application and standards for picking these projects where hopefully we can get the biggest bang for our bucks.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Fred. I think any other questions on that first proposition? I see Nick has his hand up. Nick, if you want to unmute yourself, then please.
Just want to clarify that, Fred. So the basic money comes from investors who buy into the projects?
Yeah, well, they don't buy into the projects. We sell the bonds. These are municipal bonds. government bonds. So we'll sell the bonds, and the proceeds will be used to pay. But those that are buying them, they're buying a bond. They're not investing in a particular project.
And debt service is the interest that has to be paid, right?
Yeah, the interest plus the principal. Eventually, usually these debt service payments are scheduled. They can be scheduled different ways, but typically, when I was in town government, most of the payback you pay a part of the principal and part of the interest each year, and that listen, it can be even payments of principal over the years, or you can start out paying more interest, less principal, but we're paying the principal and the interest back over the time period.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any, so I'll ask Fred if you would like to move on to the next proposition.
Yeah, this is kind of short, but I'll mention it just because it's on the ballot and people should know about it and people should vote on it. It is a county proposition. It is proposal 2. The County of Suffolk, for its countywide offices and its county legislature, has term limits, and those term limits are 12 years. However, when there was a vacancy in the district next to ours, like in the Mastic Beach and Shirley area, an issue arose as to what the term limit law meant. And 12 years, was that a 12 years a lifetime limit that you could hold that office? Or was it 12 consecutive years? You could then, not run for 2 years or 4 years and come back and then run for another 12 years. And that came up, and the county charter was not clear. So they have rewritten it and have put it on the ballot. And the way that it is written is that it is a lifetime limit. So if you want to run for the Suffolk County legislature and, after 12 years, you're done. Or if you ran and you were in office for 8 years and you weren't there for a while, you could come back and run for another 4 years. But it's the term limit is a total of 12 years. It's a lifetime term limit. You can't be in that office for more than 12 years. So pretty simple, I think. That's what that particular proposal does. My advice would be, please vote for it, because it's confusing now, at least whether you support term limits or not. At least if they're going to be on the books, it should be clear what they mean. And right now, the existing law isn't clear. So I don't think this is a case of whether or not you like term limits. It's a case of having a law that can be clearly interpreted, for the future. And I'm going to go on to the third proposition, which is our local proposition. And he's getting tired of me doing this, but in front of every audience. Well, actually, so many of you here have worked on this proposal number 3. But I particularly want to thank Michael Daly, who has been, really, first of all, with East End YIMBY, has been willing to stick his head up and have people swing at him with baseball bats on affordable housing projects, which is not an easy thing to do. But he's also translated that into really taking a leadership role in trying to get this proposition passed. And Catherine, so have you, and all of you here have many of you have played a role, and I want to thank all of you for that. So let me start out a little bit with this particular proposition. And the way I kind of describe the Community Housing Fund proposal is that it is the sister of the Community Preservation Fund. We created a Community Preservation Fund in 1998 to have a dedicated fund to acquire land for either open space, farmland, parks, or historic preservation purposes. Voters voted for that with upwards of 70% of the public voting for it. It's been in effect for almost 25 years. We amended it in 2016 to include water quality. And, we've got a dedicated fund that has been wildly successful in helping us to conserve land and improve water quality. This proposal this year, as I say, is the sister to that. Because if we have preserved what's best about our community in the way of protecting land and improving our water quality, but people can't afford to live here, if people can't enjoy it, they can't stay here. What have we achieved? We really haven't achieved our goal. To me, community character includes the people that live here. And that's why the community housing fund was proposed. I will acknowledge that the first time I introduced this bill was shortly after we saw the success of the community preservation fund. I first proposed it in the year 2002, which is almost 20 years ago. And for many, many years, I couldn't find a Senate sponsor in the Republican state Senate. But eventually, housing got to be so bad that the issue with housing so critical that in 2019, the Senate passed the bill and so did the Assembly. And unfortunately, Governor Cuomo vetoed it. And I will still think that for really no good reason that I could think of. So we, 2020, 2021 were the pandemic. People weren't really in the mood to be talking about, new taxes and all of that, during those 2 years, for the very reason why we held back on the Environmental Bond Act. We weren't able to move forward on this. Really, most of what the legislature was doing in those days was responding to the pandemic. But we brought it back this year in 2022. And, we're able to get it passed through both houses of the state legislature. If anything, in making the case to the state legislature this year, the case that we were able to present was more compelling than it was in 2019, because we've all seen what has happened on the East End because of the pandemic, and trends that were already in place were greatly accelerated. And that certainly was the case with real estate. And, the one statistic that I've used to kind of point out the kind of second home land and housing rush that we experienced here in 2020 and 2021 would be to tell you this, and that is, after the Great Recession, the Community Preservation Fund was generating about $90 million a year. In 2019, because of the Trump Tax Act that took away the SALT deduction, it kind of sent a shiver through the real estate market. So actually, real estate sales in 2019 were down. The Community Preservation Fund generated $77 million. So think of that first number, 2019, $77 million. In 2021, the Community Preservation Fund went from 77 million to 210 million. It almost tripled in 2 years. And, those are numbers, but what they represent is a flood of people coming to the East End to buy homes, from New York City and, other places, because they felt the East End was, a place where they would be safe. And so, the housing sales that occurred here in 2020 and 2021 are a record. And by the way, people are saying, well, real estate is starting to soften a little bit. Well, there's some truth to that. I mean, the Community Preservation Fund revenue for the first 8 months up to August is like off 4%. I think we've generated it's like 150 or 137 million, I think, through August, which is it's still the second highest in history, right? If we stayed on this path, we're still going to get close to 200 million. So what does that mean for housing? Well, it means that people came out here and bought up a lot of housing, and those who have the resources and the wealth to be able to buy a second home or have driven up the prices and can outcompete and outbid those in our community who work here or live here who need a first home. So second homeowners are outcompeting first homeowners. The prices have gone up. You know, the median sale price of a home in 2019 was on the South Fork was like about $900,000. Now it's about $1.5 million in 2 or 3 years. So prices are up, inventory is down. There's fewer houses available, you know, for year-round residents, and it's a crisis proportion. I could cite for you other statistics. I could quote to you from, you know, all the housing plans and the comprehensive plans in East Hampton and Southampton about how many housing units they need and the demand and all of that. But you don't have to read anything. All you have to do is do one of two things. Take a ride on County Road 39 in the morning or late in the afternoon, or walk down Main Street in your village or hamlet and look at the stores and see how many help wanted signs there are in the storefronts in our communities. And this is because whether or not, you know, we're talking about the hospital, and I just saw something that Mike Daly sent me. It's the video that Bob Challoner from the hospital is doing to support proposal number 3. And, you know,
Catherine produced that, by the way.
Yeah,
Catherine produced
thank
that.
you, Catherine.
She did a great job.
But he hired a radiologist. That radiologist,
hey, you know what?
made the trip
I'll play
on
it too. But go ahead.
Made the trip on County Road 39 one day and quit. There are over 200 vacancies at Southampton Hospital. Talk to any of our school districts. They have difficulty recruiting and retaining teachers to come out here. Main Street businesses, I mentioned that as far as employees. The shortage of volunteer firefighters and emergency service workers. You know, Joe Shaw from the Southampton Press says this, and it's true. They have these express sessions, and they're having one on Friday on proposal number 3. But they have them on all sorts of local topics. And Joe says this, every one of these topics, whether it be emergency service workers, the healthcare, traffic, every one of our problems that we're trying to address ultimately comes down to affordable housing and the inability of people to find a place to live here. Too much traffic, it's because people work here, but they can't live here. You know, same thing with school teachers, same things with nurses. And, you know, people that, you know, for our volunteer emergency services, you know, if you're working 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to stay here, doesn't leave a lot of time for volunteering. And again, a lot of people that work here can't live here. So, you know, we all know just by looking around us, the need that we have for affordable housing. So, listen, I don't think there's any secret to this, that, you know, the town has great authority. All of the towns have great authority to produce affordable housing. We didn't have to give them any new powers as far as being able to produce housing. What they don't have is the revenue. They don't have the resources. Just like with the Community Preservation Fund, conservation could not have kept pace with development if we didn't have this dedicated funding source. And it's the same thing with housing. You know, the towns, you know, East Hampton in particular and Southampton is starting to catch up, have done, you know, they've done a lot of great work with regard to housing, but they can only do so many projects and they can't meet the demand. You know, to solve this project takes money. It takes revenue. We're not going to build our way out of our affordable housing crisis. You know, we can't produce that kind of density, because if you increase density, then you're going to have trouble to any great degree. You're going to have trouble with regard to water quality, or you're going to have more traffic, or you're going to overcrowd the schools. So, you know, we do need increased density in selected places where the infrastructure can support it, but we also have to have the revenue and the resources, you know, not just to build housing or to rehabilitate existing structures, but also to financially assist first-time homebuyers. So we need money to help meet this demand. And that's what this community housing fund is all about. It's nothing new with regard to housing. It's just a funding source. And we looked at, over the last 20 years, all sorts of different potential funding sources. And everybody had, whatever you mentioned, everybody had an opposition. We talked about a McMansion tax where houses over a certain size would have to pay an additional fee, or the idea of some sort of real estate speculation tax to try to limit speculation and generate revenue. Somebody always hated one of them, but what we came back to was the real estate transfer tax, because people have seen it at work for the last 25 years, and they're comfortable with it. They've seen it work. They like it. Probably one of the reasons why they like it is that it is the consummate welcome stranger tax. You're going to pay it maybe once or twice in your life if you live out here, and it's the person moving into the community that pays for it. But if you think about it, there's a fairness to that. First of all, it's those buying that second home that helped to create this problem in the first place. They should help to solve it. And second of all, those of us that have been in the community for a long time and have paid our property taxes, we've made our investment in the community, and we've made it a special place that people want to come to. If you want to come, pay your fair share, and this real estate transfer tax is a way of doing that. And I tell people that this is the ultimate progressive tax. This is a tax that would make Bernie Sanders blush if he took a look at it. The bulk of the revenue is generated by the sale of houses that are more than $5 million. This is, this tax is largely being paid by the wealthy, and more so the extremely wealthy. There's a reason why 85% of all the CPF revenue is generated on the South Fork, because that's where houses are selling for 10 million, 25 million, 50 million, and above. So it is, it's a tax that is, people pay once or twice. It is the people moving into the community largely that pay it. And it is those that can most afford it that have caused the problem to begin with, that are helping to pay for this. And if they want to have volunteer firefighters and carpenters and plumbers who live in the community to help service their homes, this is a good investment for them. So I don't want to get deep into the mechanics of this, but basically we're adding a 0.5% to the real estate transfer tax that is dedicated only for housing, and a separate fund for housing. We are increasing the overall exemption on the entire transfer tax from the first 250,000 to 400,000. And you got the tax rate increases, raises revenue. The increase in the exemption subtracts a little bit of revenue. What it means is that for transactions that are $1 million or less, you will actually pay less transfer tax than you pay now under the CPF. It will only be the higher amounts the higher levels of real estate transactions that will be paying more. We didn't want to be imposing a tax on the very housing that we're trying to incentivize. And the last thing that I'll mention with regard to this is that we anticipate, it's hard to find an average year in real estate sales over the last 10 years. After the Great Recession, the Community Preservation Fund dropped to 40 million. Now it's 210 million. But if you took the average over the last decade between the Great Recession and the pandemic, we estimate that, if you get back to average years, we can generate about $25 million a year for affordable housing. And towns will have the ability to bond against future revenues to jumpstart this program to really, get out of the gate fast as far as affordable housing. So the last thing I'll leave with, and then I'll open it up to questions, is 4 of the 5 towns have put this on the ballot. Southold, Shelter Island, East Hampton, and Southampton all have it on the ballot this November. Riverhead did not. Although I saw an article today where the Riverhead supervisor said she supports it, but it's not on the ballot in Riverhead this year, but it is on the other 4 East End towns. The last thing that I should probably mention is before any of this money can be spent, each town has to put in place a housing plan saying how they're going to spend the money, which would be subject to public input in a public hearing. Two of the towns, Southampton, I think, and East Hampton, both, their plan is already available, before Election Day. I think Southold and Shelter Island are scurrying to get information together for the voters on how they're going to spend the money. But before the money can be spent, the public will know how the money is going to be spent because there'll be a plan. So I'm going to stop there.
I'm going to step in. Let me hop in. First of all, Fred, we owe you such a debt of gratitude for your work on housing and the amount of years that you have put into it. I mean, I remember 20 years ago having you at a meeting at Stella Maris about housing for the workers in the community. And so we just thank you for staying on it. I'd like to put a PSA in for the work that Michael and Bryony, myself and others are putting in on the Vote Yes for community housing. We need volunteers. So I'm going to ask at the end of the meeting for people to sign up to help us go to supermarkets, do some GOTV and do some other things. But we do have two questions. But before we go there, we've been doing a lot of videos of people in the community. We heard about Bob Challoner's video from the local hospital, so I won't show that, but let's listen to what Nana Barry from Sag Harbor has to say about the housing crisis.
I'm Nana Barry, owner for 54 years of the Wharf Shop, a toy and gift shop in the village of Sag Harbor. Over 25 years probably, we lost some very competent help because they couldn't find any affordable housing in the area. There are children who come back now who would like to stay, who grew up with us, and they're in the same situation. There are help wanted signs all over the village and the surrounding community. Please join me and vote yes on the community housing referendum, November 8th.
So we have a number of others, including Bob Challoner. We have the chief of the fire department in Bridgehampton. We have a retail worker and others. And what I'd ask you to do, if you're on social media, to either go to Pier's page or my page or Vote Yes for Community Housing page and share them so that we can get the word out. But I see Jane has patiently been waiting with her hand up. So if you want to unmute yourself, Jane, and ask your question, please do so.
Yeah, it's a combination question comment. My fear is that the word affordable means what it means nationwide, or at least in this county, and that is 80 to 120% of median income. I hope that's not what you're talking about, because I know you have many workers who are working for $15 to $20 an hour. Two people working is $60,000. They just can't cut it. They can't make it. And most of the jobs you were talking about are in that lower pay range. So if this affordable housing is the affordable of 80 to 120%, is there anything being done for those other really lower income families?
This bill, the way it's written, it basically, you can use the fund for housing, for anybody whose family income is below the median. So if it's below the median family income, so it includes, by the way, Michael will tell you that we polled both affordable housing and community housing, trying to figure out what term to use. I don't know if we ever quite agreed on. Actually, I think affordable actually polled better than community housing. But anyway, Janet, the answer to your question is that it's anything below the median income. If you're, if the median income for a family of two is $120,000, it's any income. You can do housing for any income level between $0 and $120,000. It's not pigeonholed into a particular category. The other thing that I just, in response to that question, and why did we do it that way? Well, this was state enabling legislation, right? We are enabling local governments to do this. So in working with the 5 towns, people like Tom Rule in East Hampton and Diana Weir when she was in Southampton, the towns helped me write this bill. And the one thing that they said was most important was to give them the maximum flexibility. That's why, each town can design its own housing plan, and they'll decide what's the best way to spend the money. And it's the same thing with regard to eligibility based on income. We want to limit to one group or another. If you're below the median income, which is a pretty good number, but anything below that, towns can do housing, for those income categories.
If I'm not mistaken, median income in the county right now is somewhere around 102 or 103,000.
I think it's higher than that, but it depends on the number of family members. But it's not a low number, but that's the cap. It's not a you can, anybody who's below that's going to be eligible for these projects under the state law. And the town, I guess the town will decide. I mean, some of these will be rental, some will be home ownership. Some will be, will target a certain income level, some will target lower, but those will be local decisions that will be made by the town when they put their housing plan together and how to invest this money in housing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jane. It's a very important question to be thinking about all ranges of people that we need in our community. So Catherine Levy, your hand was up next. Please unmute yourself.
So I have to say, I do remember, Fred, in one of our last in-person meetings at the Bridgehampton Bank, that you mentioned the passage of your bill and it was on the governor's desk and you were waiting to see what you had to do to get him to sign it. And I guess you didn't do the right thing or something like that. But I vividly remember that. Well,
I crossed the governor on LIPA reform, and he never loved me after that. So
right.
I'm not attributing it to that, but that governor had been known to hold a grudge from time to time.
I'm not blaming you, but I vividly remember that moment and how frustrating it was. For
Catherine. The one thing I would say, to be a little bit more serious and a little less flip about this, is it's hard to remember back to how life was in 2019 in some ways. But if you remember, the governor was projecting a big state budget deficit, said he didn't want to raise taxes to close the deficit, and then at the end of the year vetoed a whole bunch of tax bills, including this one. So to be a little bit more serious about it, I think we got caught up in his messaging about read my lips, no new taxes, that he was trying to send back in 2019. But I failed to say this. Governor Hochul, took a fresh look at it. There was never, they were on board from the get-go, and I should, thank, in this forum, Governor Hochul for signing the bill, because she gave us a second chance.
But that wasn't my question. I didn't
think it was, but
I've just remembered that moment for years. Yeah. I remember sitting in that room feeling so frustrated. So you've been a little bit more just to the former governor than perhaps he deserves, but that's fine. I think this is such a brilliant bill. The continuing revenue stream from year to year, there's such a big revenue stream, could liberate us from the bottom line of outside developers and really make these community-driven projects. And I understand that each community is going to design their own programs, but I think it helps for people to understand what an extraordinary range of things could be the result of the bill. So could you just give some examples?
First of all, as far as, construction of housing, you could be used to build new housing, rental or home ownership. Towns could do public-private partnerships. They could work, on employee housing. They could rehabilitate existing structures for housing. They could do things like provide financing for accessory apartments. So the full range of as far as production of new or rehabilitated housing, they have the ability to do. The one thing that towns don't do now that they would have the ability to do with this is to help with financial assistance to first-time home buyers, up to 50% of the purchase price. And there's a lot of different models about how to do that. You know, one that I've looked at that I find particularly interesting is kind of a shared equity concept. And I'll try to give you kind of a quick how that would work. Let's just say a house is on the market for $1 million. You've got an eligible family. We could, the town could put up to $500,000 for a down payment for that particular house and you know, get them in the market. The idea of shared equity would be, well, that, you know, when you sell that house, you know, 10 years from now or whenever and move on, let's say you sell it for $1.5 million. Well, you'll get 750 and the town will get 750. So you're getting, you know, what you put into it, your share of the equity. But, you know, what you mentioned is not only do we have the transfer tax coming in year after year, but in those cases where with like a shared equity program, that 750 or the town's 750 is going to go back into the fund and that can be used again. That's something we were never able to do with open space. You buy land, you know, that's it. You know, we've preserved it. It's great, but, you know, you didn't have that kind of revolving revenue stream that you could generate with with some of these programs, you know, helping first-time home buyers. So, you know, and, you know, again, we try to keep it flexible enough. There's probably concepts in other communities or things we may think of ourselves, you know, to address, you know, some of these housing issues, you know, with new tools. And we've kept it broad enough that I think that, you know, towns will be able to innovate, you know, going forward. You know, the last thing I wanted to have happen was every time the town changes something in its plan or its program, they got to come back to the state legislature, you know, to get a change in the law. So it's very broad. It basically runs the gamut of anything you could possibly think of that might be utilized to generate affordable housing. So it's very broad. And you know, I mentioned a number of the different categories.
I mean, I knew about the shared equity idea, and I think that's such a brilliant idea because in this village, and when I first moved here 31 years ago, there were a wide range of people on Glover Street where I first lived. And, you know, it's just completely changed now, as we all know. And that could allow people of our neighborhoods to become mixed neighborhoods again, which would be a great thing, you know, within the ridiculously high standards of this area.
Yeah, may that be so. May that be so. Francesca, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just want to point out that all the new housing that we're talking about here is an important opportunity to think about clean energy and energy security by having now all electric new buildings, which is something that we really must do, must have all electric new buildings by 2024, or we're not going to meet our climate goals in New York State. And I want to just point out that some very recent data, which has not yet been publicly released, but will be released soon by the Data for Progress, which polled voters in New York State, many of them on Long Island, showed that in fact, voters widely support ending gas in new buildings. They were asked, the question was, some New York State lawmakers have proposed ending gas in new construction projects. This means that newly constructed residential and commercial buildings would not use gas boilers or furnaces. Instead, new buildings would be heated and cooled by energy efficient heat pumps. In effect, no fossil fuels would be used in new buildings. Do you support or oppose this proposal? 66% of all likely voters supported it. 85% of Democratic voters supported it. 64% of independent and third-party voters supported it. And even 43% of Republicans supported it. So this is widely supported. And another really important point is that it is critical when you're having low and medium income either renters or owners, that they have some energy security. And as we can see by the huge increase in gas prices that has happened, is happening this year and happened last year, that these are increases on the order of almost 30%. And electricity's gone up as well, yes, but only by 10%. That it's really an issue of energy security and keeping costs down to have all electric building in new construction. Plus, it's a lot healthier. Having gas in homes is like having an exhaust pipe in your kitchen if you have a gas stove, an exhaust pipe in your basement if you have a gas furnace. So I know that last year, Fred, you did not support this, and I'm really hoping that this year you will, because this is a critical aspect of doing housing right and not locking in another 30 to 40 years of new fossil gas infrastructure that is just going to keep us from our climate goals.
Well, in context of this referendum, what I'll say is that if the towns, they desire to set that standard, they'll be able to do that, and they'll be able to use this fund to pay for it. So,
well, actually, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. It needs to be a statewide standard for this reason.
Well, I'm talking about tonight's proposition.
Yeah.
Tonight's proposition, I'm saying that's something we could do locally, and this fund could be used for it.
But actually,
Francesca, you bring up a good point, but I think
but I actually have to answer, Catherine. Please,
we don't have much of Fred's time tonight, so
we'll just take a second. In fact, you cannot do it locally because it will subject local municipalities to suits by the gas companies. That's why we have to do it by state. It cannot be a municipal measure.
I don't think you heard what I said, but I'm not going to belabor it. But I'm saying when a town builds a project, they certainly can use these funds to make them electric buildings. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Fred. And so, any other questions about this particular referendum in the group? No question is too simple to ask, and I'll just put one last one out if no one else has any. Fred, I'm wondering, since you first wrote this and you had the $400,000 as the exemption, if you've thought about now, if you wish that was higher, or if you feel fine about where that number is right now.
Yeah, I think about this all the time. It is. In passing this bill, they always wanted a specific number, as opposed to giving the authority to the towns to be able to increase that number. So, this will give you an idea of how things have changed. When we passed the Community Preservation Fund in 1998, the exemption was set at $250,000 because that was the median price of a house in 1998, was $250,000. And of course, that exemption has been eroded by housing prices out here. We picked 400, and 400 was never the median price of a house in 2019 when we first passed this. We also, it's a balance of having an exemption that doesn't impact the lower end of the housing market. On the other hand, we also still have to generate revenue for affordable housing. So it's kind of it's a balance we try to achieve. Listen, I think the 400, in 2022, after what we've seen over the last couple of years, is a little bit low. And it's probably something that we will need to look at in the future. Maybe in the future, I'll be able to convince my colleagues in the legislature that they should give local governments the ability to adjust that number to changing market conditions. So we don't have it really, especially on the East End with the market that we have, it really, I think it's a decision that maybe we need to put some parameters on it. But I think I'd rather have that ultimately determined by the local governments in response to marketing conditions. The other thing, back in the day when we did this, we were dealing with the opposition from the real estate industry and all of that. People wanted a uniform exemption out there. They didn't want different towns with different, so we had to kind of categorize it. But your point's well taken, Catherine, and that is, whatever exemption level you set, if you do it in the state legislation, it is obsolete by the time the governor signs it, right? I mean, especially in the last couple of years. So I think that point's well taken. I think it's something that, this year we're just focused on getting this thing passed. But, I think it's something we can talk about, coming up with some formula for future adjustments on this, or some way that better, can adapt to changing market conditions.
Great. Thank you, Fred. And I just dropped into the chat a link to the event that's happening this Saturday at the clubhouse. And I want to encourage everybody to copy that and share it with their friends and join Fred, who will be at the clubhouse on Saturday, along with a number of other people talking about this. And there's going to be lots of fun and hors d'oeuvres and all of that there as well. I think it's 5 to 7. Michael Daly can correct me if I'm mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct.
And, I'm sorry, Michael, but Fred, we have had you now for an hour. I don't know if you want to, maybe we'll pause on the Albany update, but if there's anything on the general elections here locally that you'd like to, first of all, we want to support you. How can we support you? And what else would you like to say about the local elections?
Sure, let me talk about it a little bit. And, off-year elections are hard to predict, right? And, in March and April, I felt like I was behind a 6-foot wall and a 15-foot tsunami was headed my way. Things were, very, very, you have the history of off-year elections where the party in power usually doesn't do very well. And then, it was just high gas prices, just a whole host of things. And then, the Supreme Court intervened, right, with some of the worst decisions in the history of jurisprudence over the summer. The president had some legislative successes, gas prices started to drop off. And, that fear of a red wave now makes a lot of races, across the country and certainly across New York State look more competitive. We're still dealing with the history of off-year elections, with the party in power. But I would say, there's never been an off-year election that looks like this, and there have been exceptions to the rule. There was 2002 after 9/11. There was 1998 after the Republicans overreached on the Clinton impeachment, and there was a reaction to that. And, there's a couple of things that I think make this different that encourage me a little bit. And one is the fact that I just feel energy out there after the Dobbs decision, where I think voters, there's been an increase in enrollment, particularly women enrollment, and that is certainly changed the dynamic, I believe, a little bit. The other thing about off-year elections is usually people are looking at it as a binary choice, right? I mean, they elect a new president. 2 years later, not everything got fulfilled. People, their dreams weren't fulfilled, and they tend to take it out on the new president. But it's a binary choice. It's, do you like the president or do you not like the president? This is an extraordinary year, and is that, do you like the president or don't you like the president? But that guy Trump is still lurking on the edge of town, and where it's like, well, I might not love everything that the current president is doing, but we certainly, don't want to do something that empowers, Trump. And I think that's largely true, certainly with suburban voters and, swing voters that, so all of those things give me hope that, first of all, this is not going to be some sort of gigantic red wave, but, it's all about getting your voters out and whatever you can do to help get out the vote, I think. So I think that's the, that's kind of the lay of the land. I think, the House of Representatives is still difficult just because of the numbers and where we start from. It's such a narrow march, but the Senate, I think, is certainly, we could actually pick up Senate seats, I think. So, I think what I don't know is, today is October 12th. I forget what his name was, but once a reporter once asked a British politician who was running for re-election, what his greatest fear was. And he said, events, because what's going to happen between now and November 8th, I don't know. Where the gas prices spike? Does something happen in the Ukraine? Who knows? So I think there still remains to be seen. What voters are going to do. Historically, in these elections, it's possible to have a lot of late deciding voters, and a lot of these swing races typically they're all going to go one way or the other. So I think that's the climate. Then to kind of talk about things specifically, I think, listen, our statewide candidates, Kathy Hochul, Chuck Schumer, Tom DiNapoli, Tish James, if you see the polling, they're all in the mid-50s. Everybody's got to get out to vote, but I think they're all well positioned. I'm just going to focus a little bit of time, one on Bridget Fleming, and then two on me a little bit. And Bridget has a tough race. We love her out here on the East End. She's represented us in the county legislature. She's going to do very well out here. But I think every time I've talked to Pierre, I always remind them 2/3 of the district is Brookhaven and Smithtown. And now there's a little bit less of Brookhaven and a little bit more of Huntington. Bridget's district, it's an open seat. It's roughly a 50-50 proposition. And because of the climate and all the things I mentioned, the climate probably leans a little bit towards the Republicans. But, her opponent is an unknown. I really don't know anything in particular that he stands for. I don't know whether he's trying to fly below the radar screen. But what I would leave you with is that, I think that this is a slightly uphill battle that is winnable. And, getting out the vote, and particularly out here on the East End where we know Bridget's going to do well, is really, really of critical importance. I said this over at a fundraiser over in North Haven. It is not impossible that a seat like New York 1, could make the difference in what does happen with the House of Representatives. This is one of a handful of seats that are actually competitive and in play because of redistricting across the country and where it's gone. I mean, most of these districts are either bright blue or ruby red. There's a very small percentage of districts across the country that are competitive. This is one of them, and this is an opportunity, not because we know and love Bridget personally, which we do, but because it literally does have national implications. And so lastly, my race, I've got a 26-year-old Trumper, true believer, worked for Lee Zeldin, has a patronage job at the Board of Elections, and, doesn't have much to say for himself, but is already out there, attacking me personally. There's a mailing this week. I'm going to, fully disclose this, right? I mean, I got remarried about 8 years ago. My wife had a house. I had a house. My wife decided to sell the house a year or two ago, and we're building a second home. I talk about second homes a lot, but we're building a second home in North Carolina because someday I'm going to retire. And after spending 27 winters in Albany, it's likely that I might spend January and February in North Carolina. But he's trying to make it sound that I'm leaving the area, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm dealing with right now. Is that he'll just lie, and he's got really nothing else to say. I was very heartened. I really got a nice endorsement from Newsday today. I really appreciated that. But I'm mindful of this being a difficult climate too. And you folks will ask me about my election, and I've had an opponent that for most people, they thought my opponent was in the federal witness protection program. They never came out of their house or anything. I've got a real opponent in a tough political climate. So I'm not taking anything for granted. I think, I think we're, I'm proud of my record. I think we're well positioned. It's a good district. After redistricting, I gained Southold. So I have Southold, East Hampton, Shelter Island, and most of Southampton. I do not have the Riverside, Northampton area in Northwest Southampton anymore. That's going to be in Jody Giglio's district. And I have a little bit of Brookhaven that goes from like Eastport, Center Moriches, and Moriches. So I had one goal in redistricting. First of all, I knew I had, because the population growth in my district was the greatest of any district in the state of New York. I had to lose 20,000 people because all these districts have to be of equal population. So my district had to move further to the east. And I had one goal, and that was to get rid of Trumpland and Zeldinville. Zeldinville is in my backyard, Mastic Beach, and Shirley. I used to have a substantial portion of that district. They're going to come out of the woodwork in that district to vote for Lee Zeldin for governor. And I doubt they were going to cross over and vote for me. So, one of the benefits that I had through redistricting is really losing the most Republican part of my district. My existing district voted for Joe Biden with 55% of the vote in 2020. My new district voted for Joe Biden with 59% of the vote. So it's a better district, but listen, it's the baseball playoffs. I'm going to use my baseball analogy. Any guy standing up there with a bat who swings it can hit a home run, right? I mean, so you can't take anything for granted. I really, I just like Bridget, the only thing I'll say is, when I run for the assembly, I'm either running when the president runs or when the governor runs, which means I am the last line on the ballot. It's a humbling experience to be the last line on the ballot. You got to make sure that people make it all the way to the end of the ballot to vote for you. So that's the first thing you can do for me. But, I'm not only the last line on the ballot, but I think what we found out after Dobbs and the concealed weapon case that the Supreme Court decided, and the environment case that the Supreme Court decided, I'm not just the last line on the ballot, but me and the members of the state legislatures across the country, I'm just not the last line on the ballot. We're the last line of defense. The reason New York is a pro-choice state is because the legislature is pro-choice. The reason why we have the toughest gun safety laws in the state is because the legislature supports gun safety laws. And it goes down the line. Right of privacy, gender equality, you name it, it's because the legislature is there. And I used to hear, Roe versus Wade, it's settled law, right? It's never going to change. And we found out that was true. And you hear the same thing in New York. Well, it's settled law. It's only settled law as long as, choice is only settled law as long as you have people in the legislature that support it. So, these state legislative races are important. And, so I appreciate all the support. I appreciate all the work I've been able to do with Peer, through the years. And, I have things are going well, but it's not, there's not a single race you can take for granted. And mine is certainly one of them. And, when you're talking to people, remind them that, it's a tough climate out there, and you need to, to vote from one end of the ticket to the other. So, thank you,
Fred. Thank you. Listen, we will definitely shout that from the rooftops, but other than the GOTV that the Democrats are doing, is there other actions that we can engage in directly for you?
Well, if you'd like to send me a check, if that's appropriate to talk about, you could send one to Box 1407 in Bridgehampton. 11932. And the name of my committee is Citizens for Fred Thiel.
Okay.
And I only brought it up because you hinted at me at least 3 times. So
no, listen,
thanks.
we're here to help you. We want to.
Understood, and I appreciate the help. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So
So
where
I think
can we get signs? Because I've only seen one.
We have if we have signs certainly, and we're getting them out there. If you would like, if you'd like a sign, and if you you know, if you email me, probably the easiest way to do this tonight is if you email me at fwt1953@yahoo.com. And, you know, with your name and address, I mean, we'll put up a sign for you.
But is there a place where we can get more signs?
Yeah, well, Bridget Fleming, her headquarters in Southampton, has signs also. Okay. My signs.
Fred, is that FWT1953@yahoo.com?
Yeah, that's the year I was born.
And I figured that out. Okay, thank you.
Fred, one more time. What is the name of your committee that we should write?
Citizens for Fred Thiel.
Citizens for Fred Thiel. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. Listen, Fred, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate it. And just one more reminder, please flip the ballot over and vote for the proposition. So thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll be in touch. Jane has a good idea regarding something about the housing proposition, but we'll be in touch offline about that.
All right, sounds great. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Fred.
Bye.
Everybody stick around, because now we're going to hear from Sharon, who's going to help us determine how we can help Bridget in a race that Fred says is winnable as long as we get the vote out. So Sharon is on our voter registration committee with Jerry Maslanka, and she's also a principal in East End Action Network. So Sharon, please. Oh, I think you may be muted.
All right, I was typing in some information while Fred was finishing up, but do I put my cursor on the message and then click return?
Yeah, that would be probably work.
It's not going anywhere. Oh,
there you go.
There you go. Okay. All right. It's nice to see all my committee members are here except for Jerry. That's terrific. We've been writing over for Bridget, just to get a very briefly, we've written over 10,000 postcards between Bridget's campaign and the Southampton Dems. And a lot of that is thanks to Andrea Klausner of the Southampton Democratic Committee. She had just printed, the Southampton Dems just printed 6,000. And I have to tell you, I took 1,000, and in less than a week, they're all assigned to people to write already. I've been going to Bridget's fundraisers and bringing postcards with me in little packets and passing them out like party favors. But now we are out of the printed things, so that initiative is winding down now. It's only if some people still have some that haven't been written. And I'm still going to get some more addresses from Bridget's campaign and buy my own postcards and start to give those out at the fundraisers, because we all know that the phone banking and the canvassing is just not what some people feel comfortable doing, but they are eager to pick up a pen and feel like if they write 50 cards, maybe 10 of those people they'll make a personal connection with, but hopefully all 50. So the postcards is wrapping up, but it's been very successful. So there's phone banking, text banking, and canvassing options, many options every day, every time. And the best way for you to find out about those opportunities would be to go to Mobilize. And that's a
okay, Ruby, soon.
And that's a group that we've all used for our events. And if you go to mobilize.us, Bridget for Congress, it'll take you right to all her events, and you can RSVP right there. And you can also put in your zip code, and you'll get Skylar's events, and you'll get
Fred's.
Jackie Gordon's events and Fred's, and all of them pop up. There are just so many. We've been, trying to list them, and there's so many. I put the 71 Hill Street is Bridget's Southampton office, and you can get signs there. I know they had some more coming in. If you can check there, I can add the phone number. Lawn signs. Another way of getting information on all things canvassing is if you subscribe to the East End Action Network. This is a plug newsletter. East End Action Network, if you're not familiar with it, is a grassroots group. We do not compare ourselves to peer. We're a different genre of grassroots groups, but we do have over 400 people that receive our newsletter every Monday morning at 9 o'clock. And we have been trying to be diligent about listing the canvassing, the phone banking, the fundraising, the forums, and the meet and greets on there. It's a lengthy process to get it all in, but we've been trying to do Skylar's and Bridget's mainly, and some of Jackie Gordon's. We haven't really received anything from Fred yet, but maybe I'll just reach out to him after this now and tell him that if he does have any event, we'll put it in there for him. So over 400 people do get that on Monday morning. And if you haven't subscribed to it and you'd like to, I put my email in the chat, and you'll start getting that on Monday. So now really is a transition time, now that we're getting to the end of the month, where we're not going to be spending as much time convincing people to vote for Bridget, as we're going to start the GOTV end of the whole process, where we're going to actually start ensuring that those voters are placing those votes. And that'll be the next step. And that'll be, all those new activities will be listed soon. And I don't know, Catherine, how you're going to, there's a lot of information from the East Hampton Dems today at length, and I'm sure that you'll get that into your emails to the peer members, and we'll get it in our newsletter, just a different things that will be happening.
Will there be texting for Bridget, do you know?
Text banking?
Texting, yeah.
Yes, there is.
Okay, so, and you can just go to her website too, actually, to find that out.
Go to her website, or actually to get that, or her Facebook page, but some people don't have Facebook. And I've just found that the Mobilize is a really handy way, because those events pop up that you see on Facebook, but they're all in one place.
Right, and I dropped the Mobilize link into the chat so people can just grab it from there.
Okay, I'm not good at putting things into the chat, so thank you.
That's
I need a little lesson.
Right, yeah.
After the election.
Okay, great. Yeah, and as Francesca's saying, she doesn't see texting on there. I don't know if it's on it, but texting would be on Bridget's website if you can't find it on Mobilize.
I did see Mobilize, but sometimes you scroll through Mobilize and it'll say more like this. If you just keep going, it opens up more and more events.
Okay. Okay.
And it goes all the way through GOTV to sign up for dates at the office, to make phone calls, to give people rides. It just keeps going. It's
terrific.
Endless.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. We appreciate that. And before we turn to Catherine Levy, who's going to talk about Schuyler and also some national races, I just want to really put a plug in for volunteers for the proposition that Fred spoke so sort of passionately about, the housing proposition. We do need people who will go to grocery stores and post offices to hand out literature over the next several weeks. I know Sigrid, who's on the call, has volunteered to go to Hampton Bays, King Cullen. She needs a buddy if she hasn't found one. I'm not sure if Katerina has offered yet to go to the Bridgehampton Commons, but we really do need volunteers. So please drop your name in the chat if you can volunteer to help us. Really just 1 or 2 hours would be great. If you could do it 1 or 2 hours once a week, that would be even better. And if you don't know if you can commit right now, you can send me an email and let me know. And if you have friends who might be able to do that, we really need your help, because as Fred said, the referendums and all of the elections, we have to just get the vote out. We have to make sure we get the people to the poll. So let's now shift over to Catherine Levy, who's going to give us a little information about Schuyler and national Senate races.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Sharon said what probably needs to be said about Schuyler, but I put his website in the chat. You have to scroll up a little. I share Sharon's problem about pasting things into the chat. So if you just scroll up a little bit, you'll see three things: Schuyler's campaign, NIPAN event, donate to progressive Senate candidates. And under Schuyler's website, you can find a place to donate and all of the volunteer opportunities that you can do for Schuyler. And, you know, I have to say that, I mean, I know there's so many things we need to do. If Schuyler went to the Senate, he would be a vote for the New York Health Act. And, you know, he would be so much better than the person whom he's opposing. And we need that state legislature to be more progressive than it is. And maybe as Fred, you know, enters into the last 5 or 6 terms of his life as an assemblyman, he finally got the community housing fund, let's hope. Let's hope he could get New York Health Act as well. And Schuyler would be an absolute vote for the New York Health Act. So, you know, just let that not get lost. Along the same lines, I know everyone's fixated on Bridget. I want Bridget to win, believe me, but we have to hold the Senate, and it would be very good if we could increase our margin in the Senate, because if there's a Supreme Court vacancy, we could turn things around in this egregious court. And aside from the Supreme Court, all of the judicial appointments for the next 2 years are dependent on the Senate. If Mitch McConnell is the Senate Majority Leader, those appointments are going to be filled with the kind of wonderful Trump people whom you see ruling for him in all of the lawsuits and everything. And we desperately need to protect basically democracy, our environment, voting rights, everybody's basic civil liberties, and reproductive rights, because there's still more things they can do to reproductive rights. So there are 6 critical Senate races that I'd like people to think about. One of them is someone I love in Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes, one of the best candidates I've ever seen. And he has a real shot. He needs money and he needs people to help him remotely in many of the same ways that people are helping Bridget. Fetterman has a real chance in Pennsylvania, and that would be a very important seat to pick up. So if Barnes and Fetterman were to win, we would have 52 senators, and we wouldn't have to pay so much attention to Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, which would be nice. Raphael Warnock, who's just one of the best people in the Senate, is up against this, you know, former football player whom I think had one too many brain injuries or something. And he's an egregious candidate, but it's still a very tight race. And, you know, you could help to reelect one of the best candidates in the country. And there's also Catherine Cortez Masto and Mark Kelly. Masto's in Nevada, Kelly's in Arizona. So this link that I sent you would allow you to donate to any of those people. And sadly, as we all know, money matters in these races. So anything that you could give, even $25, and persuade your friends to give would be helpful. And as we're talking about money, NIPAN, our umbrella group that has done so much for this state, was so instrumental in defeating the IDC, for instance, and is fighting so hard for the New York Health Act, is hurting for money. They're having their first in-person fundraiser in 3 years. They very much need people to either attend, or if you don't want to attend, as I don't, to donate just a little bit of money. And there is a link there for you to do that as well. So that's everything I have to say.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. I see Sharon speaking, but you're muted. So if you could unmute yourself and speak, that would be great.
Barnes, what state is he in?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, thank you.
And actually, the governor there is very important too, because if we have contested election results in 2024, which we're going to have, The governors in each of these states are going to be incredibly important. So he's up for re-election too. These are both very tight races. And, you know, if you want to support two people in this list, please support Barnes and Fetterman. They could be flipped seats, and they would go into those Senate seats and be really terrific progressive senators.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. It's crucial to add seats to the Senate for all the reasons that she enumerated. You know, democracy is on the line, and we do not want Mitch McConnell to be the leader of the Senate come January. And Francesca, you have your hand up. I think you added something in the chat.
I have a quick thing to add. I put it into the chat. The Environmental Voter Project is an amazing organization because they target people who care about the environment but are low propensity voters. And they've been able to really move the needle by like 5 to 6% on previous election cycles. I put the link in the chat there because they are doing phone banks into Arizona and Nevada, also New York and Wisconsin, all those critical Senate races that were just talked about. And the cool thing about it is these are people who do care about the environment. It's just they tend not to vote. So you're not dealing with hostility, you're dealing with boosting voter turnout.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's great.
Yeah, it's great to know that they're going to low propensity voters. That's an often overlooked constituency, and we really need to do that. So thank you. So great. Well, that's the meeting. Unless are there any other announcements or questions that people may have? I see Katerina's looking for a partner to leaflet at Bridgehampton Commons. So if anybody can help her, please be in touch. Thank you for that. Sigrid, have you found someone to help you? Still looking?
I'm looking, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll find somebody for you. And so thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm just going to stop the recording, and if I can, I'm not sure exactly. Suddenly it's not allowing me to do that. Anyway, there we go.